This is TrojanVision One-on-One. Today's featured guest is Hall Waters Prize-winning novelist Cassandra King. Now, here's your host, Dr. Kirk Kernut.
Hello, I'm Dr. Kirk Kernut, Chair of English at Troy University, and welcome to TrojanVision One-on-One. We're taking over the airwaves today with a special guest, and I'm honored to welcome Cassandra King, the novelist and speechwriter, I guess we can call you now. And you're with us today because you are the recipient of the 2017 Hall Waters Prize. So we're very honored to have you on our campus today.
Thank you. It's an honor for me to be here.
It's actually a little bit of a homecoming, even though you never attended Troy University. You are essentially a neighbor from here. You grew up in Pinkard, Alabama, which is 57 miles away.
That's right.
Very interested in your life as a child and what that was like, and so tell us a little bit. What role did books have in your growing up years?
I was raised on a farm and out in the sticks. I'm putting on airs when I say I'm from Pinkard. I mean, you know, we didn't live in Pinkard, but lived on a farm, and it was isolated. We didn't have neighbors around, not close neighbors at all, and so I spent most of my childhood reading. That was my thing. I fell in love with books at a very early age, and as soon as I learned to write, I started writing my own books.
Right.
But reading, I've heard other writers say this, and it really, really applies to me. If it saved my life, it was in a different way, I guess, and it saved me from being bored to death. You know, some writers say reading saved their lives, and they mean it a tad more literally if they came from a very unhappy household or something like that. But I came from a very stable, undysfunctional family, really, of just hardworking.
What kind of farm was it?
It was a peanut farm.
Peanut farm, okay.
But we raised, that was the commercial part of it, but we raised all our everything that we ate practically. Had chickens, we had laying hens, we butcher on meat, so we had hogs and cattle, and had horses. So I did a lot of horse riding and so forth. So it was a true, working farm.
Right. You were telling some of the students earlier that you have begun a novel about the farm, and I'm sort of curious about other farm novels you might be sort of challenging or taking on as you're writing. Are there cliches about farm life that you think literature has gotten wrong so far and that you want to correct in this book? I
don't think so. I think that what, of course, has gone back for centuries is the tendency, of course, to over romanticize farm life and to the pastoral setting and so forth. So it's very hard work, for one thing. It's often not it's not an easy lifestyle. So if I think that maybe the only sort of cliches that I might tackle a bit of is either has been treated maybe in literature as over-romanticized, or so hard-scrabble that it's difficult to read. Grim, some of those kind of books about farm life. And so I'm going to really deal with a more updated. It's going to be contemporary, because I'm very passionate about the attempts that are going on to preserve the family farm.
Right. And I believe is your sister or cousins involved in that?
Yeah, my sister is living on the King family farm. She and her husband have that and are partially farming. That's part of the people can't make a living farming anymore, and that's part of the reason that the the family farm is disappearing from the American landscape. So that's going to be part of the focus of the book. But this will be, as I say, contemporary, and I think I'll probably have to do something from the farm to table, with the farm to table movement. And this may be what eventually saves the farm, partially what I'm planning on doing with it now. Is I've only got 7 or 8 chapters of the novel that I've started, but to show the challenges now and difficulties, because I want to have my main character as someone like myself who grew up on a farm, could not wait to escape, was embarrassed to tell anybody, I'm a farmer's daughter, the sort of, because of the connotations and so forth. But goes off and got involved in developing real estate development. So you got to have the evil developer in there somewhere. And but has a huge financial crash and has no choice to come back and just to come back to the farm. She has no intention originally of preserving the farm, but then that becomes her. She realizes the value of the farm that she never realized before.
Sounds like a great plot, and I think it's really neat that you're trying to sort of show that we can't preserve the past, but that yet there are ways to maybe sustain it.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
You are the author of a novel that I think kind of falls into the category of, and I don't use this term, but I don't mean it the way it might come off, of a cult novel. And the idea that a novel inspires a sort of group or a movement. You wrote a book called The Same Sweet Girls, and I can't tell you how often I speak with women readers who tell me the effect that that book had upon them, and essentially the idea that friendships between women are a very important theme that they want to read about. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's certainly not anything that has not been dealt with, in fiction before. One of the, I think the differences in this book is that it is based on a group of women that I've been friends with since college, and we call ourselves the Same Sweet Girls, based on an incident that happened when we were in college together. This sort of a bonding kind of thing, and so we've been getting together, and we some of the girls now. There's some of them a little bit older than me, but we had our 50 time that we met recently, fairly recently. So for that many years, decades that we have been, dear friends, and so I really like to deal a lot with the transformative power, redemptive power, if you will, of friendships. And since I know more about women's friendships, and especially having this group of friends for so long, then that was a natural kind of thing. But with this I wanted to touch more on sort of the ups and downs. It's one of the most gratifying things that I've had folks say about this book, because this is absolutely what I intended, is that it's not a sentimental look at friendship. Because you see these women and you have to think, good grief, how can they even be friends? They're snipping at each other. So it's just the way, that's the way it, that's part, it's like family. They, your friends become like family, and then ultimately deal with some of the social issues that have to do with to what extent would we sacrifice for a friend.
I'm always curious when women write about women's issues. There's a sort of prejudice out there, and we were talking today about whether you sometimes feel like you're a little shuffled off in a niche called women's literature, women's fiction sometime, which is kind of grossly unfair, and that usually that means stuff that men don't challenge themselves to read.
Yes.
I'm wondering, when you are out there with your books, do you find that prejudice in sort of the reviewers and the critical response to your work?
Yeah, of course. You're going to run into that. I was actually once uninvited to a group I had been asked to speak in before I could say. I don't think folks really into, because it was romance writers, you know, a group of romance writers, and asked me to come speak, and then evidently somebody asked me and then read one of my books based on the covers or the marketing or something like that, then read one of my books and thought, ooh, you know, no, probably the same sweet girl, you know, because Sunday wife either, maybe. But, you know, certainly you can find yourself categorized if you deal with you know, various issues, but certainly women's issues.
You did a book, and I believe it was the one that preceded Same Sweet Girls, called The Sunday Wife.
Yes.
And you were dealing in there with, one of the things I like about your work is you in dealing with friendship, you also deal with, I think, friends who are sort of therapeutic for each other, and you do that in The Sunday Wife, and you also do it in The Queen of Broken Hearts. And talk a little bit about the friendship as therapy, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't. You know, I think sometimes as writers, I'm speaking, you know, for all writers. No, I'm trying not to speak for all writers, but it's certainly been my observation that we write, we have these stories we want to tell, and I don't sit down and think, you know, I'm going to deal with the issue of euthanasia in this book. I mean, it's more organic than that, and these issues sometimes come out of the story. I don't think I intentionally write issue-driven books, but so maybe rather unintentionally, just coming out of the story was this idea of a woman seeking her own identity, which I did in The Sunday Wife, because she was a preacher's wife, and she was identified by her husband's role, and the expectation, she had to live up to the expectations of her husband, her church, her community, and live in a goldfish bowl. And she found herself trapped in this life until she becomes friends with a woman who is just the opposite and doesn't give a hoot what anybody thinks about her, and she's kind of the wild child. So this was a very, very transformative friendship, and it was almost the impetus of the whole, you know, to carry the plot along. With Queen of Broken Hearts, I deal with much more literally in that. It's I do have I have a therapist in the main role in this, and her focus as a therapist is in helping folks, and she helps men and women go through a divorce and recover from the divorce later. So so this comes about in her relationship with her daughter and with a close friend who are both having struggles with their marriage. So she's literally the friendship is more therapeutic there.
I wonder, as someone who writes or has written about women's friendship, do you find yourself having friendships with your readers? Do you see your relationship with your readers along those same lines?
Yes, that's been one of the wonderful things. It's one reason I think that writers do go to these book festivals and stuff, because it's such an opportunity to connect with your readers. And I have become friends with some of them, very dear friends. There's a group of women that I spoke at their book club one time in Tennessee, and they came down for a visit with Buford and and you know, met Pat, and we took them out to dinner and stuff like this, and I feel like they're close friends.
That's really neat. That's
yes.
a neat thing. I think there's another prejudice in publishing sometimes, and that's ageism. And
yes.
would like step back into your first book. Your first book came out in 1995,
Yeah.
and if you don't mind me saying this, you were 50 years old at the time. I'm wondering, you had a long, and I know you studied creative writing when you were at Montevallo in college,
Yeah.
so it was a long time to get a book published for you.
Yeah, well, part of that was I didn't intend to write a book.
Okay.
Yeah, I had an idea when I went off to college that I would be a playwright.
Okay.
I became, and I still love plays, you know, and so that was a strong interest in playwriting. I was not interested at all in acting or anything like that, but writing, and I think that may be how I've learned how to do dialogue.
Right.
You know, was through this in writing, you know, plays and stuff like that. So, and then when I wrote some short stories and had a couple published in, you know, some quarterlies, more what they call the literary kind of quarterlies, the short story seemed more fitting for me because when I was always such an avid reader, I loved big, fat, thick books.
Right.
If I got into a book, I wanted it to last. I wanted to, you know, devour the whole thing. And so I love Dickens and, you know, these kind of James Michener, these huge books. And it just seemed like an overwhelming thing to me. So my first novel ended up being a novel. I was going to do it as a collection of related short stories, and but once I got into novel writing, I haven't looked back. I haven't wanted. I've been asked to contribute a couple of short stories to various things, and I've done some essays, but not short story. I just now, you know, after being able to expand, you know, your characters' lives and all this stuff like you do in a novel, I haven't been that interested in a more concise kind of fiction.
It is very difficult, I think, to figure out what is a short story and what's a novel. I mean, sometimes ideas kind of take on a life of their own, but I also think the fact you make your living by writing novels, and there's not really any money in short stories anymore,
No, in poetry and short stories, it's such a shame, but you know, there's so few folks that, and you can hardly get your agent to even talk to you about writing a collection of short stories. They don't want to do it. They don't want to hear it.
You mentioned Pat, and we need to talk about Pat Conroy, who was your husband, who passed away a year ago last March, very suddenly from cancer. And he was the 2015 recipient of this award. I know it's been a tough year, and I know that, you know, I know the loss has a lot of literary implications because you two were very celebrated for being a literary couple. I mean, I think I've seen pictures of y'all writing laptop to laptop or something like that. I'm curious the relationship between loss and writing and grieving, and can you talk a little bit about were you writing when he was diagnosed and how that affected your writing, and at what point were you able to come back to writing?
Yes, it was a very, very difficult time because Pat wasn't really sick. I had lost my sister a couple of years previously after a 3-year battle with cancer, as we, you know, often happens. And so when he died 5 weeks after his diagnosis, I did not have time, and you know, none of the family really did to really prepare ourselves that this was going to happen the way it did. So it's, you know, the shock as well of the grief, not having time to have made it a different, you know, a different kind of experience. I think I was writing on the farm novel, and had talked to him about. He was very interested, because he always told me that was the book I was born to write, having that's in my background, and so forth, and knowing my passion for the restoration of the family farm. I couldn't get back to it, but I couldn't get back to much of anything after he died. And then I was asked to write the introduction to his posthumous publication of some unpublished essays and so forth. So I managed to do that, but I still wasn't able to go back to the family farm, and maybe I associated it too much with that's what I was working, and he was so encouraging. And so I started then. I had intended, and he and I had even talked about doing a memoir sort of cookbook to get about our lives together and our cooking together, and how much we enjoyed that, and the different occasions and all the stories that go with cooking. So I started working on that. It seemed like the time. So just last summer, I was able to get back to writing, because writing the introduction was so traumatic in a lot of ways for me that I couldn't do anything for a while after. It took me a few months to get back, and that has been very surprisingly therapeutic.
Good.
It's been difficult, though. I mean, it's been very, very difficult, because as we all know, when we've lost people, when we go back and remember these times that we had, either had so much fun together, or a shared tragedy, or things like that, then you relive it.
Yeah.
It's there all over, and it makes you miss that person that much more. Right. Who else is, ever going to, have shared this moment with me, and sort of, this kind of thing. So I'm not saying that, it was just once I started writing about him, then all the grief was just gone, or anything. It was hardly has been. Like I say, I'm just into about over 100 pages into that one, but it's been very, very therapeutic.
Good.
Thanks.
I'm fascinated that it's in the form of a cookbook, and there's a lot of literary talk in the last 20, 30 years about comparisons between reading and writing and cooking.
Yeah,
and
the creative process of cooking, isn't that?
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting.
And you were speaking about this morning, and you said cooking and eating food is such a community sort of thing, that it seems like a great, I just love the fact that y'all cook together. And I'm sure the whole time you were cooking, you were telling stories and trading stories. So what is the relationship between cooking and storytelling?
Well, I think that so much of our memories of cooking, of particular dishes that we enjoyed or didn't enjoy, the time that somebody, forgot and put, salt in instead of sugar, or in the pie, that's kind of a well-known story, and this sort of stuff. It's all tied in together, with what was going on in our life at that time. That strong bond. It's, I don't think we cook for ourselves in the same way that we cook as a communal a way. It's a way of showing love, of hospitality, of course. It's very much a cultural, I think, phenomenon as well. And but cooking together, we were usually only cooked together when we were entertaining. If it was just one or the other of us would throw together something for our dinner, it was just us. But we both have large families, and we would entertain. If we had writers visiting or something, we would entertain friends and so forth. So there are just so many stories that are tied in with these occasions, these special occasions in our life, and then so in some ways, these foods come to represent these occasions.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like we always pull out a certain dish when we're putting on the dog, you know, when we've got someone we want to impress with, you know, or really honor. You know, so that deserves our best china and our best dishes, and we usually can tell a story about this dish. Now, this was my grandmother's, and she came over from, you know, Switzerland and what, you know, and so let me tell you about, you know, I had to perfect this dish by so and so. And I mean, it's just the story is part of the whole event, the whole occasion.
Well, believe it or not, we're almost at the end of our time. It goes so quickly when you have a half hour. But I have one final question. You've been honored for your contribution to Southern literature, and I'm just curious what it means to be recognized for being Southern.
That's a great question because I don't have any problem being labeled. As we were talking about labels and being labeled as just a woman writer, a writer of women's fiction is one thing, but I don't have a similar sort of reaction to being labeled as a Southern writer, because I feel like in so many ways I celebrate the Southern culture. We have a very unique and certainly fascinating and rich, very troubled history as Southerners, and that's what I know. I am writing what I know by being so to be honored for contribution to Southern writing. It means a great deal to me, because I have, you know, been labeled very definitely as a Southern writer. When one of my reviews said that I had a tendency to overdo Southern quirkiness.
No such thing.
And I took issue with that immediately, because it was in People magazine, so I figured they didn't know, you know, they were
not exactly a Southern magazine.
Exactly. So you know, if it'd been in Southern Living, I might have taken it a little more seriously.
That would have been
that would have been worse. But you know, you can't make this stuff up. You can't make it up.
Well, thank you very much. We're honored that you came to Troy University today, and that you're also here to be part of the Alabama Book Festival, which is tomorrow. I apologize if we've worn you ragged with so many events and things, but it's really a pleasure to recognize your work, and I've been a fan of yours for a long time.
I knew you were a man of good taste.
Well, I appreciate that. I just want to close by pointing out one little element that we put on the award, and I think it's probably the one that really tipped the scales, talking about the empathy and the emotional bonds of friendship, and I think that's so important for literature to recognize. So
yes, me too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honor.